Have you ever felt like you're living inside a box? A sealed room lit by artificial light filled with the hum of electronics, where the only thing that moves around you are the notifications flashing on your screen. I've been there, and strangely enough I realized something. We're more connected to the world than ever before, yet somehow we've lost connection with the earth itself, with nature, with our breath, with the pulse of life that surrounds us every second. A friend of mine in New York once told me, "For years I lived among skyscrapers but never actually saw the sky. Every morning I'd check my phone before I even opened my window." And I understood that, because most of us live like that now, chasing the modern rhythm of speed, productivity and success, as if they were the measure of our worth. But let me ask you this, have you ever stopped to wonder why, even when everything looks fine on the outside, you still feel tired, empty, or strangely restless inside? 2,000 years ago, the Stoics had already seen this coming. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "Live in harmony with nature, for that is living according to reason." It sounds ancient, but to me it's never been more modern than it is today, because in this digital age, where we can touch the entire world with a single tap, we've forgotten what it feels like to touch the real ground beneath our feet. When you stand in the forest, or even just take a walk in the park, have you noticed something? Nature never rushes. The trees don't force themselves to grow faster. The rivers don't race to outflow each other. The birds don't argue over who sings better. Everything in nature moves at its own rhythm, in perfect harmony with itself. But humans, we forget that. We fight the flow. We push, we force, we cling to outcomes, and we convince ourselves that if we could just control everything, we'd finally find peace. But Stoicism taught me something different. Peace doesn't come from control, it comes from alignment. I remember a woman I once worked with, a financial analyst from Chicago. She told me, "I feel disconnected from everything." It wasn't loneliness. She had friends, a good job, a full life, but inside she felt hollow. I suggested something simple. Every morning, take 15 minutes to walk outside. No phone, no music, no podcast, just walk. Listen to the wind, feel the cold air on your skin. Watch how the sunlight hits the trees. A few weeks later, she texted me, "I didn't realize I was practicing Stoicism, but I feel calm. Peaceful in a way I haven't felt in years." And I smiled, because that's exactly what Stoicism is about, returning to what's natural, simple, and deeply true. Stoicism was never meant to be a distant, abstract philosophy. It's the philosophy of life itself, of farmers, soldiers, and people like you and me trying to stay steady amid the chaos of the modern world. And the ancient Stoics understood something profound. Nature is the greatest teacher of stillness. Imagine this for a second. You're sitting by the ocean. There's nothing but the sound of waves. A bird glides over the surface, leaving a small ripple that expands outward, slowly, gently. For that brief moment, you're not thinking about the past or worrying about the future. You're simply there. That's what it means to live in accordance with nature, to return to the present moment. Now I know, in our fast-paced lives, saying live close to nature can sound unrealistic. Not everyone can just pack up and head to the mountains, but the truth is, living close to nature isn't about where you go, it's about how you live. It's a mindset, it's the choice to open your window each morning and let real sunlight touch your face, to pause for a few seconds and watch the clouds drift by, to care for a small plant on your windowsill and realize that it grows at its own pace, just like you. When you do that, you're not just tending a plant, you're training your mind, you're reawakening your senses, your eyes, your ears, your heart, to life as it truly is. In Stoic philosophy, nature isn't only forests, rivers, or mountains. It's also the natural order within us, the part of us that is calm, rational, and authentic. When we live in harmony with nature, we live in harmony with ourselves. We stop pretending, stop proving, and start listening to the quiet, honest voice inside us. Maybe you haven't realized this yet, but every time you feel exhausted and want to run away from it all, it's not weakness. It's your soul longing to return to nature, to slow down, to breathe, to simply be without needing to be perfect. And sometimes, that's all it takes. An afternoon walk under the sun, or a night spent quietly watching the moon, to recover what thousands of self-help books could never give you: peace. So today's video isn't just about living close to nature, it's about living true to yourself. Together we'll explore 10 Stoic perspectives, timeless principles that can still illuminate our modern lives. Because when you align with nature, you don't just find peace, you rediscover your place in the world. Take a deep breath and listen. 1. Nature is the mirror of truth. When you look at a river, do you notice something? It never tries to be more beautiful, stronger, or different. It just flows, honest, simple, and without judgment. That's the first lesson the Stoics learned from nature, to live as it is, unfiltered and unmasked. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Everything that is natural is beautiful, if only you look at it with a clear mind." Nature doesn't need filters, and neither do we, at least not in our truest selves. But modern society teaches us to wear masks, the social image we post online, the status we project at work, the roles we play just to be accepted. We live the way others expect us to, not the way our soul quietly asks us to. I once worked with a businessman in Los Angeles, a man who always had to be on top, always in control. He said, "I'm successful, but it feels like I'm acting all the time." And I told him, because you've forgotten to look at nature. No tree worries about being judged, no river fears comparison. A few weeks later, after he started walking outside every morning, no phone, no headphones, just listening to the wind, he told me something I've never forgotten. Nature didn't teach me how to succeed, it taught me how to be real. That's the power of truth in nature, and in ourselves. 2. Every season has its purpose. If you've ever lived somewhere with 4 seasons, you understand this deeply. No season is better than another. Each has its rhythm, its beauty, and its reason. Spring teaches us renewal, summer teaches us joy, autumn teaches us release, winter teaches us rest in them, and rebirth. The Stoics believe that life too moves through seasons. There are times when you bloom, when everything feels easy, alive, but there are also winters of the soul, when all you have is silence, fatigue, and unanswered questions. Epictetus said, "Don't wish for winter to become summer. Everything happens in its own time." He was reminding us that not every moment in life is meant for striving or progress. Sometimes the wisest thing you can do is to rest without guilt. I once met a nurse in Seattle. She was exhausted. Every day felt like a race she could never win. I asked her, if a tree never rested, could it ever blossom? She laughed and then tears filled her eyes. The next week, she took time off, went hiking, watched the snow fall, sat quietly in the woods. When she returned, she told me, "I didn't just see winter in nature, I found the winter within myself." And I finally understood why it was necessary. Nature never rushes. Everything happens exactly when it's meant to. Maybe what we need to learn isn't how to move faster, but how to slow down at the right time. 3. Nature teaches us impermanence. Have you ever watched a leaf change color? It doesn't panic, it doesn't cling to the branch. It simply lets go gently, like a soft farewell to the season that's ending. In Stoic philosophy, that's the symbol of acceptance, the wisdom to understand that everything that is born will grow, change, and fade. We fear loss, we fear aging, we fear the passing of time and the people we love slipping away. But nature reminds us that death too is part of life. Without autumn, there could be no spring. Without endings, there would be no beginnings. Seneca wrote, "We do not lose time." It simply passes as it must. Think about that. Time isn't stealing from you, it's fulfilling its purpose, like the rain that falls, the wind that blows, the leaves that drop to the earth. And when you truly accept that, your heart becomes lighter, almost instantly. I once spoke with a woman who had lost someone dear to her. She said, "I wish time could just stop." I told her, "No, let it flow. Time doesn't take you away from them, it carries you forward." She was quiet for a long moment, then whispered, "Then I'll learn to flow with it." That is the essence of Stoicism, not to resist the natural order, but to move with it, gracefully. 4. Stillness is strength. In a noisy world, silence has become a luxury. Every day we're surrounded by sounds, cars rushing by, ads playing non-stop, people talking, phones buzzing. But tell me, when was the last time you truly heard yourself? The Stoics saw stillness as the foundation of wisdom, because only in silence can we see the truths that noise so easily hides. Seneca once wrote, if you want to improve your mind, spend time alone, not in isolation, but in illumination. Just as a calm lake reflects the sky clearly, a still mind reflects reality without distortion. I once worked with a young man from Texas. He told me that I'm afraid of silence. It forces me to face myself, and I replied, "That's exactly why you need it." A month later, he wrote back to me, "I'm no longer afraid of silence. It feels like a friend now when you sit in nature, among the wind, the rustling leaves, the gentle sound of water. Silence stops feeling empty. You realize it's alive, because silence isn't absence, it's the space where the soul begins to heal. 5. Nature teaches us patience. Can you make a seed sprout faster? Of course not. It will grow when it's ready, when the season, the soil, and the sunlight align. That's the lesson most of us in this 1-minute world have forgotten. Epictetus said, "Nothing great is created suddenly. The sun doesn't rise just because you're impatient for morning." Nature teaches us patience, the trust to stay in the process without trying to skip ahead. I once met a woman in San Francisco who said, "I can't wait for things. I need everything to happen fast." Now I told her to plant a cactus. She laughed, but she did it anyway. 3 months later, she texted me, "The cactus just bloomed. I get it now. It wasn't the plant that was slow, it was me who was living too fast." I smiled when I read that, because that's exactly what nature reminds us of every single day. When you live close to nature, you learn a quiet kind of strength, the strength of someone who doesn't need to rush, yet keeps moving forward. Because they understand this, a seed doesn't need to hurry. It only needs soil, water, sunlight, and time. And the human soul is no different. When we observe nature, we don't just see beauty, we see ourselves, our cycles, our wounds, our rebirths. These 5 perspectives are only the beginning of a deeper journey, a journey back to nature to understand the true essence of being human. 6. We are part of the whole. One of the most beautiful ideas in Stoic philosophy is this: all things in the universe are connected, like the limbs of a single body. Marcus Aurelius wrote those words, and he was right. We do not exist apart from nature. We breathe because of the trees, live by the light of the sun, and are sustained by countless connections we rarely even notice. But modern life, built on me, mine, my goals, makes us forget that we are not outside of nature. We belong to it. I once worked with a man in San Diego who struggled with anxiety and loneliness. He said, "So I have friends, a job, everything I should want, but I still feel lost." I asked him, "When was the last time you looked up at the sky and felt like you were part of something bigger?" He was silent for a long while. Weeks later, he told me he had started spending his evenings on the porch, just watching the moon. And one night it hit him. I'm not alone. I am part of it all. Stoicism teaches that when we see ourselves as separate, we suffer. When we remember that we're part of nature, we find peace, because no wave fears disappearing. It simply returns to the ocean where it belongs. 7. Nature teaches us humility. Have you ever stood before a mountain or looked out over an endless ocean? In that moment, your sense of self suddenly shrinks, not because you feel unworthy, but because you realize how small we all are in the vastness of the universe. And that smallness doesn't diminish you, it frees you. The Stoics always saw humility as a virtue. Arrogance is born from illusion, the illusion that we can control everything. But nature reminds us otherwise. You can't command the rain to fall, you can't tell the wind to stop, you can't make the sun rise earlier. Seneca once said, "Man is only a small part of nature, and therefore must live as a humble part of it." I once drove through the Arizona desert, scorching hot by day, freezing cold by night. Out there I realized, there's no room for ego. You can't conquer nature, you can only learn to respect it. And when you finally do, something softens inside you. You stop needing to control everything. Nature teaches us that true power doesn't come from dominance, it comes from humility, the quiet acceptance that we are not the center of the universe, but one harmonious part of it. 8. Nothing is wasted in nature. Think about it. In nature, nothing truly goes to waste. Fallen leaves feed the soil feeds the trees feed the birds and the animals, and when they die, their bodies return to the earth. It's the perfect circle of rebirth. The Stoics saw in this a profound truth. No pain is meaningless, no failure is wasted. Everything contributes to the growth of the soul. I remember a woman once told me, "I feel ashamed of my past. I've done so many foolish things," I told her. "Look at the forest. Every tree has broken branches, yet it still grows tall. Those scars are what make it strong." She cried, "Oh dear." And a few months later, she began keeping a journal, writing about her journey through heartbreak and healing. She told me, "I finally understand nothing in my life was ever useless." Nature throws nothing away, and neither should we. Every mistake, every wound, every loss can become the soil from which your strength grows. When you understand that, you stop fearing what falls away. You realize that even in pain, life is still working in your favor. 9. Simplicity is living in tune with nature. The longer I live, the more I believe this. Happiness doesn't come from having more, it comes from needing less. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be simple like nature." Because nature isn't complicated, water is just water, wind is just wind, a tree is simply a tree. But we humans add so much: expectations, comparisons, competition, and the constant fear of not being enough. A friend of mine in Boston once made a lot of money, but he was terrified of losing it. He told me, "I can't enjoy anything anymore. I'm always afraid it will all slip away." I asked him, "When were you happiest?" He thought for a while, then said, "When I was a kid, fishing with my dad." And I smiled. That's because back then, you didn't need anything more. Stoicism isn't against success. It simply asks you this: do you own your possessions, or do they own you? Nature doesn't need excess to survive. A tree doesn't have to be the most beautiful tree in the forest to live. It only needs sunlight, water, and soil. And when we become that simple, when they're done, we stop competing, we stop fearing loss, and we start breathing again. Simplicity doesn't mean living poorly, it means living authentically. It's knowing what's enough, and realizing that enough is one of the most beautiful words in any language. 10. Nature brings us back to the present. Finally, the most precious gift nature gives us is the ability to return to the present moment. When you hear the sound of waves, you can't think about the past. When you breathe in the scent of the earth after rain, you can't worry about the future. Nature pulls you back to now, the only place where life truly happens. The Stoics always reminded us, only the present is real. Seneca wrote, "We suffer not from the present, but from memory and imagination. The past exists only in recollection. The future exists only in speculation. But meanwhile the sun still rises, the birds still sing, the waves still crash, no matter what's going on inside your head." I once met a man who had just gone through a painful divorce. He said, "I can't stop thinking about what happened." I took him to a park, sat with him under a tree and said, "Look at this leaf. It doesn't dwell on the leaf that fell yesterday or worry about the one that will grow tomorrow. It simply exists." We sat there quietly for 10 minutes. When we got up, he said, "I get it now. I've been everywhere, except the place I'm actually living. That's what nature does. It brings us home to what the Stoics called logos, the natural order, the harmony of life itself. Because only when you are truly present do you stop merely existing and start living. Nature doesn't need to speak much, it simply is. And in that being it carries every lesson humanity has ever searched for, about truth, impermanence, stillness, patience, and harmony. When we live close to nature, we don't just find peace, we rediscover what it means to be human, calm, humble, content, and present. And perhaps, as Marcus Aurelius once said, the one who lives in harmony with nature lives in harmony with reason. Because nature never makes mistakes, only we do when we forget that we are part of her. Close your eyes for a moment, listen to the wind, maybe it's the hum of your fan, or the sound of cars outside your window. Wherever you are, imagine standing in a quiet forest, sunlight slipping through the branches, your breath merging with the breath of the earth. That's not imagination, that's a memory buried deep in your soul, because at our core we belong to nature, we've simply forgotten. Stoicism was never about escaping the world, it's about living within it, without letting it own your soul. And the best way to do that is to return to nature, to the place where everything moves in rhythm, without hurry, without pretension, without competition. In a world obsessed with doing more, perhaps what we truly need is to return to less. Less worry, less comparison, less consumption, and a little more presence. In the morning, just open your window and let the real sunlight touch your face. At noon, step outside, feel the warmth of the air, look at something green. At night, turn off the lights, sit in silence for 5 minutes, and listen to your own breathing. These simple acts, as in these small moments, are what Stoicism looks like in modern life. No complicated theories, no retreats into the wilderness, just a mindset of harmony, letting nature in so your mind can rest. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you seek tranquility, live in accordance with nature, both the world around you and the nature within you." I've always found that line both simple and profound, because nature isn't only forests, rivers, or seas, it's also the nature within you, the quiet, honest, rational part of your being that you sometimes forget. When you learn to listen to it, the noise of life no longer pulls you away. You begin to live slower, deeper, more truly. Someone once told me, the older I get, the less I want. I just want peace, and I replied, peace isn't somewhere far away. It's right here, in your breath, if you're willing to stop and feel it. That is the essence of Stoicism, not escaping, not competing, not denying, but fully living in what already is. And nature, in her quiet wisdom, always finds a way to remind us of that. So if today you feel tired, confused, or empty, step outside. You don't need to go far, just a few minutes, under a tree, watching the clouds drift by, listening to the birds. Let nature speak to you in her silent language, that you don't need to be perfect, you don't need to rush, you just need to be present and real. And if this video resonated with you, share in the comments, what was the last moment you truly felt connected to nature? Let's build a community together, a space for those who love Stoic philosophy, for those who are finding their way back to peace. Don't forget to subscribe and like to continue this journey with Stoic Awakening. More the journey of rediscovering ancient wisdom in our modern world. And remember, nature has never left us. We just forgot the way back. Take a breath. Welcome home.